Hello there, my name is Nick Allegretti. I will be talking about CSS3 animations. This is going to be a two-part video. We will be going over kind of all the elements that make up a 3D flip card and how these animations work and what each property does. And then the second part will be a flip card tutorial of making our own flip card and seeing the ins and outs of how it works. So let's jump right into the different properties of the CSS flip card. Okay, during this tutorial we're going to be referencing Rupal's Unfold GitHub account. And that's kind of what we're basing this tutorial on. He has a really great series of projects and they kind of go through all the parts of the flip card and what each part does and how it manipulates the CSS. So let's jump into it and talk about the two main properties of the flip card is the translate and the rotate DOM elements. So when we're talking about translate, we're talking about translating on the three different axes, the X, Y, and the Z. This is kind of like moving the box along the plane. So the X is going to move it along the X axis, the Y is going to move it up and down, and the Z is going to change it from being towards you to going further away. We're going to see this in an example that we're going to do later in the tutorial, the second part. So the rotate functions are flipping the card, so we can flip it along the x-axis, the y-axis, and then the z-axis, depending on which way we want our flip card to rotate. Before we go any further, I want to make a distinction that I think is important. That right now we're looking at transform properties. Those are the translate, rotate, and backface visibility properties. And then we're going to go over, well, what we're going to go over right now is the container properties. So we're going to have this flip card that has a front and a back, and we're going to want to rotate that to see the front and the back when we click on it. But that front and back face are going to go in a container, and that container can have what's called perspective, which we're going to go over right now. So the first thing that we see here is transform style. So we can put that with this preserve 3D value right here. That's going to make our box look 3D. We are going to use the transform 3D style because we want to see that card rotate and flip in like a 3D on a 3D plane. But we're not going to have a box like what's shown here. So we have this transform style. Now we have this perspective, which kind of represents like a z-axis, which shows how far the box is going to stretch away from the camera. Then we are going to have perspective origin, which we're not going to go over in this tutorial, but it is interesting. So just to give a brief review, we have our translate function, which moves the element in space. We have our rotate, which rotates the element in space. And then what we're going to use is this backface visibility, because we want to hide the front of the card when the back face is showing, and we want to hide the back face when the front is showing, so that the text don't bleed over to the other side and we see both of them. Okay, so I think we're ready to jump into our own flip card example. I'm going to kind of show you the finished product so that we know what it looks like, and then we can work from there. So here's our flip card right here. We have a front and a back face, and when we click on it, we have this beautiful animation that occurs. Let's just take a look right now into the body. So it's really simple. There's one card container that holds the whole thing. There's a content which has a front and a back face. That's all the HTML that we need. We'll take a look at that in Atom in a second. But this is the simple part. We can see that there's a class being added when we click, and that's this applied flip class. And we're going to take a look at that too. So let's jump into the code and see what's going on. So here's our HTML. Like I said, we have our card container, the content in the front and the back side. We have one line of JavaScript, and that takes care of the toggling the applied flip class when we click the card. Okay, the more complicated part is the CSS. Okay, so we're gonna go over each part and kind of see how it applies. Like we said before, there's these container properties. And on the container property, we have this perspective. If you remember, the perspective was this part that distinguishes how far away from the camera we want the card to flip. So that's going to affect how deep this flip goes, right? Because right now we have a kind of a great distinguishable 3D flip. And if we added, how can I explain this? So the less pixels it has, the more depth the card gets. Let's try this by affecting this perspective right here. So let's give it a perspective of 500 and see what happens. Okay, I noticed a little bit more here. Let's try 200. Okay, do you see how it's changed? We have a much greater perspective. The card extends way deeper into the screen like this, and it creates like more of a 3D effect. I think it's a little distracting, so that's why we will keep ours at 1000. All right, so now that we kind of understand the perspective, let's jump into the content on the card. That was what holds the front and back face. So here we didn't really talk about this before. So there's this transition property that talks about, I guess, how fast the animation is going to happen. So our animation is going to happen in 0.5 seconds, and it's going to start relatively fast and kind of slow down out of the transition. And then this is where we stick our preserve 3D quality. That's the one we were talking about that like helps us see the 3D flip. This is kind of the next most important part. It's the actual flipping of the card. So let's take a look at this right here, this card.applied flip. So when we apply this, well, when we click, it's going to add this class that transforms the card. We went over the transform property earlier, and that has this rotate Y section right here, which is going to flip the content 180 degrees along the Y-axis. Right here on the front and back, we just give them a specific color so that we can distinguish the front from the back. All right, these two CSS selectors are here because in IE we have a little bit of an issue, and we have to manage this backface visibility property by ourselves because Internet Explorer doesn't support it. We're not going to go into all the details of what goes into Internet Explorer, but we will talk about the rest of the browsers, which are the same. So here we are setting the front and the back to have a back face visibility of hidden. That's for the purpose that we do not see the back of the card when we flip it. Otherwise, here we could see front content written over back content just backwards because it would be the back of the front face of the card. So when we click the front face, we want the back of the front face to be hidden and the front of the back face to come into visibility. And that's what this is managing right here. So we apply it to both the front and the back, that they have their back face visibility hidden. This too is managing the card flip. So when we have this card flip, we want the front face to go back to 0 degrees. That way it doesn't get in the way of the back face when the card is flipped, when we originally flip it right here, the content of it. So when we flip the content 100 degrees, 180 degrees, we want the front face to be at 0 degrees so the back face can show. And this is the same with this back face. We want the back face to go backwards to 180 degrees. We put a negative 180 degrees here, just to determine which way it flips. Like right now it's flipping from left to right, from right to left. If we put positive 180 degrees, it would just flip the other way. So that's pretty much it, because this next part right here is managing how we work in Internet Explorer. We kind of have to hack it. We have to set our own visibility right here, and we do these with these keyframes. Okay, so let's wrap this up with a little bit of review. We have our card here. We apply the applied flip class when we click it. We have our JavaScript and our HTML. But the main, most important part is all the CSS that is pretty much managing the flip, which sides are visible. Take a look through my code, pause the parts that you need to look at again. But let's close reviewing these transform properties and the container properties. So like we went over, we have our translate, which moves the card along the X and Y and Z axis. We didn't use that in the flip card because we're not moving the card, we're rotating the card. And that brings us to our next property, the rotate property. We didn't talk about transform origin, but we did talk about backface visibility, and we're going to set that to hidden the whole time because we want to hide the front and the back when the card is flipped. So our container properties control the depth. Remember, we showed the depth of the flip when we changed the pixel to 200 on the perspective instead of 1000. Our transform style we set to the perspective 3D, which gave it that 3D look when it flipped. And perspective origin we didn't talk about either. So take a look through this tutorial. This is a great resource right here. And look through my code and build your own FlipCard app and see where you can apply it. It is as useful as the extent of your imagination, so go explore with it. Thanks for watching this video. I'm out.